Good morning, this is World News coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. In just a couple of hours, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia will disconnect from the Russian energy grid in a significant EU-backed move to strengthen their energy security. Here's more.
This weekend, the three Baltic states are set to cut one of their few remaining links to Russia.
We'll no longer be dependent on the aggressor state and will have full control over our own energy system.
Still part of the Soviet-era Brel grid, along with Russia and Belarus, the Baltics will switch to the continental synchronous area, with an aim to ensure a reliable frequency control needed for a stable and secure energy supply. But before the switch is concluded, they will have to operate independently for a brief period.
By 9 p.m., we will be disconnected from the Russian synchronous area and will operate as an island of the Baltic states. This island operation will last until Sunday afternoon, when the Baltic Sea electricity system will be connected to the continental European synchronous area.
The long-awaited switch cost some 1.6 billion euros, three-quarters of which was covered by the EU. While it comes 10 months ahead of the planned deadline, Ukraine managed to achieve this feat 3 years ago. Experts say it's because of the scale of the project.
Main reason has been that our grid is built up in a way that is actually part of the former occupying state, Soviet Union. So to rebuild it from north to south, starting from Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, we had to do some investments, and investments take time.
While consumers are not expected to feel any impact, either in power supply or prices, authorities are prepared for potential Russian interference.
Readiness is high. As I also said, we have addressed the National Armed Forces, the Home Guard, to make sure that they are also present so that there's no possibility of some kind of hybrid threat undermining this whole process of disconnection.
Nevertheless, the switch is more of a symbolic event, because the Baltic countries ceased imports of Russian power back in 2022 due to major diversification efforts.
Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has endorsed the creation of an EU rearmaments bank to finance defense projects. As EU leaders agree on the need to increase military spending, countries are now debating on how to use EU funds to bolster defense.
An EU bank which would help bring defense projects to life. This could soon become a reality. Poland's foreign minister said the idea to create a rearmaments bank was worth considering. He argued that the new institution could be similar to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is used as a tool to build market economies.
Faced with the threat of war from Russia, the Union needs something similar, but on the scale of today's challenges, including the reconstruction of the defense industry and defense in Europe.
After the Trump administration took power in Washington last month, NATO and EU member states have been under even more pressure to boost their military expenses.
We will need funding, both public and private funding. We will need more cooperation for better interoperability and lower costs, simpler legislation, for instance, on public procurement, and more innovation.
While putting forth the idea, Radosław Sikorski pointed out that strengthening Europe's defense capabilities is the continent's insurance card.
This is a welcome initiative from Sikorski, particularly because it can be opened to like-minded allies such as the United Kingdom and Japan. We have an urgent need to build up our defenses, and creative thinking like this is essential.
Such a rearmament bank would be beneficial not only because of its accessibility for non-EU states, it would also be immune to opposition from within the EU.
That's the genius part of this idea. It represents a coalition of the willing and not the entire EU where there would be a consensus principle. So indeed that countries such as Hungary cannot veto anything.
But some experts indicate that the scheme could overlap with existing structures within NATO.
The first real question I have is, what is this EU bank for rearmament defence investment going to do differently to what the NATO programme that already exists actually does?
EU leaders gathered for an informal summit earlier this week to discuss the possible financing of defense projects by the bloc. But no concrete solutions have been presented so far. The European Commission estimates that EU defense financing needs roughly an extra €500 billion over the next decade to fill critical gaps in European defenses. Poland, which currently holds the rotating EU presidency, has convinced Brussels to contribute to its border reinforcement project called East Shield.
Since our eastern border is the external border of the EU, I am very thankful for the confirmation that duties relating to protecting the border will be treated as a common duty. We have already found resources for that.
East Shield is an 800-kilometer-long line of fortifications along Poland's frontier with Russia and Belarus. It remains unclear to what extent the EU will support the more than €2 billion project, which is already under construction.
Polish politicians have reacted to US President Donald Trump's decision to name Thomas Rose, a conservative columnist and former publisher of the Jerusalem Post, as ambassador to Poland, pending Senate confirmation. Here's more on who Mr. Rose is.
US President Donald Trump has announced his choice for the new ambassador to Poland. Although the nomination is yet to be confirmed, Thomas Rose has already shared his initial reaction.
I am deeply honored and profoundly humbled to be asked by our history-making president to serve as ambassador to Poland. If confirmed, I will spend each and every day doing my very best to promote, defend, and advance the interests of the United States of America and our fabulous president.
In an interview with TVP World prior to his nomination, Rose reflected on the future of EU-US relations under the Trump administration.
So I think the U.S.-Polish relationship is going to be emphasized more than ever before.
Rose is a businessman and right-wing commentator who previously published the Jerusalem Post. He served as an advisor to former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and has hosted a radio show.
I had a show on Sirius XM, the satellite radio company, for about 9 years before your favorite president was elected and my favorite vice president was elected.
And looking at Rose's ex-post announcing the nomination, it appears he continues to play favorites.
He did not mention Poland. He did not make any references trying to build bridges, which is what ambassadors usually do. What he said was basically playing into Donald Trump campaign agenda, America first.
But although Trump is said to appreciate loyalty, there may be additional motivation for this nomination.
Former U.S. ambassador, which was appointed by Donald Trump, Ms. Mosbacher, she was also a business person. So indeed, these nominations of President Donald Trump are more business-oriented.
In line with the current U.S. administration's rhetoric, Rose also criticized USAID, calling it, quote, the largest Democrat money laundering operation in history.
He's going to promote American interests, and judging from what he has done so far in his life, a conservative agenda, a Zionist agenda, a strong support for Israel, a strong support for American business and conservative values.
In January, Rose criticized Poland's possible compliance with an International Criminal Court arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu related to alleged crimes in Gaza, should he enter the country for the 80th anniversary of the Auschwitz liberation.
Donald Tusk, be careful, threatening to arrest Prime Minister of the Jewish state at Auschwitz, of all places, is not unnoticed by the USA. Poland deserves better.
At the request of Polish President Andrzej Duda, the Polish government adopted a resolution guaranteeing Netanyahu's uninterrupted participation during the potential visit to Poland. Although Netanyahu did not attend the ceremony, Rose praised Duda's initiative, reinforcing their bond from December when he called the Polish leader America's greatest friend in Europe. In a Friday press conference with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said his attitude toward the new U.S. ambassador will be characterized by friendliness, as he represents a country which Poland is allies with. Other Polish politicians also hope for amicable relations.
Anyone who becomes an ambassador should also be a diplomat, so I hope that he will put his personal views regarding numerous topics aside.
Mark Brzezinski, the former U.S. ambassador to Poland nominated by President Joe Biden, stepped down in January prior to Trump's inauguration.
Donald Trump has announced that he plans to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky next week. The U.S. president intends to discuss a deal in which the U.S. would continue support for Ukraine in exchange for the supply of rare earth minerals. The American leader also said that he plans to hold a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin.
I will probably be meeting with President Zelensky next week, and I will probably be talking to President Putin. I'd like to see that war end. One of the things we're looking at with President Zelensky is having the security of their assets. They have assets underground, rare earth and other things, but primarily rare earth.
In response to the announcement, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote, quote, "We appreciate the cooperation with U.S. President Donald Trump and plan to meet and discuss the details at the team level," in a post on Telegram on Friday evening. Ukraine is taking a new approach to strengthening its military forces. President Zelensky has announced the launch of a special recruitment program aimed at young men between the ages of 18 and 24. The initiative, separate from the country's ongoing general mobilization, offers voluntary one-year contracts with significant financial compensation. It is intended for men under the age of conscription who are willing to serve voluntarily in the Ukrainian armed forces. All details on the expected number of recruits remain undisclosed. Estimates suggest that between 300,000 and 800,000 young people could potentially join the ranks under the initiative. Zelensky emphasized that experienced combat brigades are working closely with the Ministry of Defense to develop these contracts, offering substantial benefits and high salaries to attract recruits. The one-year contracts will allow young volunteers to serve under special conditions and incentives, which will be further detailed in the coming days. Officials have made it clear that the minimum legal draft age will remain at 25, and this initiative is purely voluntary for those who wish to support their country. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will visit Poland next week, the Polish Ministry of National Defense confirmed on Friday, to discuss defense cooperation between the two countries. The visit is part of a week-long trip to Europe, during which Hegseth is also scheduled to visit Germany and Belgium. Hegseth's European trip will begin in Germany, where he is set to visit the U.S. European Command and meet with U.S. servicemen currently stationed in Germany. Hegseth will also attend the NATO defense ministers and the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meetings in Brussels. On the last leg of his tour, the Pentagon chief will travel to Poland, where, as mentioned earlier, he will meet with the Polish defense minister to discuss further bilateral defense cooperation. Hegseth also plans to visit American troops currently stationed in Poland.
Hey, we're gonna make sure there's accountability for what happened.
Tens of thousands of Slovakians gathered in over 30 cities on Friday to rally against the perceived policy shift of Robert Fico's government. The government has slammed demonstrations by claiming protesters are planning a coup d'etat. According to protesters, over 40,000 people gathered in Bratislava's Freedom Square. Protesters continue to demand Fico's resignation following widespread criticism of his visit to Moscow in December of last year. In the aftermath of his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Slovakian opposition planned and thereafter rejected a no-confidence motion against the Prime Minister and called for a snap election. Fico rebuked the claims of a pro-Russian turn, saying that while he is critical of some EU policies, his policy is still determined by EU and NATO membership. And with this, we conclude our news bulletin, but please stay tuned for more World Talks coming up next.